I am about to interview Joel Thompson, and you are in for something that I'm really excited about. So, just so you know my process, I interview somebody, and then after I interview them, I do the intro and the outro because I want to make sure that I'm preparing people the right way, but I'm also wanting to make sure that I get some of the best stuff from an interview for my outro, just to encourage people. So, what I'll do here is I'm going to keep this short and sweet with the intro. Joel Thompson is a CPA, and then he moved into the construction industry after school and has a lot of experience with the construction industry in various levels with different organizations. He now owns basically a consulting company that really comes in and helps primarily construction companies, but a lot of different organizations maximize their output, maximize how they're thinking about things. You're going to hear this three-pillar system that he talks about with tech, people, and process. So you're going to hear about that. Stick to the end to hear about that. What this interview is really about is tech, and more specifically AI, and how disruptive it is right now, but how disruptive it's going to be for decades to come. This interview went off in a whole bunch of different directions that I never thought it would go. And that's something that I love about interviewing people, is that you ask a couple of questions and somebody's expertise or experience or thinking about a problem just surprises me in some unique way. And I get really curious about that. So we can rabbit trail a bit. And I really appreciated Joel sticking with me as we rabbit trailed and thinking about how nimble an organization needs to be, and what are the problems, what are some of the main problems that organizations are going to be running into very quickly because of how disruptive AI is. I trust you'll enjoy it as much as I did just as we finished here, and enjoy listening, watching here, and we'll touch base a little bit at the end. All right, we are live. Thank you, Joel Thompson, for this has been a long time coming, hasn't it? This one podcast, scheduling, a whole bunch of other things. I am really grateful that you've stuck with this and that you're still willing to do this interview with me, Joel. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, great topic, great time. So yeah, I'm very eager to have this chat.
Good. So maybe we'll start off with just some of your background. So feel free to brag on yourself a little bit here, Joel. That's a good thing, just so that people understand where you're coming from.
Sure. Yeah. My background is, I'm a CPA, CFO for large construction companies going back for, well, decades now, aging myself. But, and my focus has always been I call myself an internal CFO, how to make the business run better. And I've come to become a student of the business model, if you will. How does this organization, how does this structure add value? And AI has popped up as a game changer in that world. So I've started to focus a lot on the short and medium term effects that this is going to have on us. Of course, the long term effects are science fiction to me, but the short and medium term effects, I think, are things that are very relevant. And my background in we always look at it. It's technology, it's people, and it's process. Those are the three pillars that we look at, and one of the pillars is just expanding. So that's going to affect pillars 2 and 3 in another way. So I've been spending a lot of time thinking about that and how it's going to affect what leaders need to be thinking about, and what's keeping them up at night, and what is AI going to look like for that. It's a little early to tell, but it's going to be profound.
It's funny you talk about science fiction, and I hang out with I've got 2 teenage kids. We hang out and we watch movies. My wife and I and the kids hang out on Friday nights and watch movies. But it's fun watching older movies that we're trying to glimpse into the future and seeing what works and what doesn't work and how this all kind of comes together. It's fascinating because on one hand, what we dream up in science fiction does come to pass in many ways. On the other hand, like I remember this was Star Trek, where you can talk to somebody on a screen. And you're just like live talking to somebody. Thought that was so cool. And we're living that right now, right? As we speak right now. But there are other things that either we are unfair to what tech can accomplish in a short period of time, or people with tech can accomplish, or we sometimes underestimate, sometimes overestimate. Maybe before we get into AI, just maybe help me understand how you've helped leaders recently or in the past deal with tech in general, just to frame this.
Yeah. The problem has always been in technology, and now it's going to slide into AI. But people look for the technology, they find the solution, and now they try and force the solution into the problem, and that never works. You've got to start with, how do you deliver value to your customers, and then build a comprehensive system that includes your people, includes your process, and includes your technology, to come up with a fulsome solution, an integrated solution. At the end of the day, we share the same pool of talent for people. We share the same market for technology, but what's different is how we bind it together through process. That's where the differentiation comes in. And I always try to make sure people remember that. What makes you different than your competitor is how you do what you do, how you add value for the customer. So start there. Start with your pain points. How do you deliver this better, this faster, this more accurate, whatever your metric is in a particular business. But that's where you got to stay focused on. Don't get fixated with the tools. Don't get fixated with what your clients are doing, or what your employees saying. I've also noticed that oftentimes employees say, well, if I can make myself more efficient, that makes the business more efficient. And although that sounds logical, it's not necessarily true. Sometimes if you make one part of your business super efficient, you've just moved a bottleneck someplace else, and you've created more pain and more friction elsewhere. So it's got to be a fulsome look. And that means you got to step back to a certain level. And I don't know what level that is, depending on the complexity of your business. Maybe it's 10,000 feet, 30,000, maybe it's 100,000 feet. Take a look at the model. What do you need to work on? And that's what I try and focus, the 3 pillars. Stay focused on your problems and your business model. Don't get distracted by shiny objects, I guess is the best way of putting it.
Yeah, which entrepreneurs, we're susceptible to shiny objects. We get excited about shiny objects. I always say, like, it's easier to sell an entrepreneur on something than any other person. Like, if you want to do good sales, talk to the entrepreneurs, because they get excited about new ideas. You mentioned this a number of times, Joel. You said that, and this is business 101 on some level, but don't get excited about the product, the solution, and then try to find out where the problems are. I hear this all the time, especially from non-entrepreneurs. Every non-entrepreneur I talk to who has a business idea is saying, hey, I've got this idea and it's going to help with these things because it's cool. I'm like, that's great that it's cool. But where is the value? You mentioned this a number of times. Where's the value that you're bringing? What are the problems you're actually solving? How are you bringing more value to somebody's life or their business? And as you do that, the product will take care of itself. I've just been going through, what is the book called? 10X is easier than 2X, Dan Sullivan. And just thinking through strategic coaching and ingoing, there's so much value to legitimately saying, how do I bring the most value as possible to my consumer or customer base? And when I do that, I'll be fine. We'll be able to put the people and process in place to do that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, you were going to say something?
Yeah, well, yeah, I was one of the things that you mentioned a little earlier, and I'm kind of going back a little bit, but you mentioned earlier that the misunderstanding of the magnitude, the forecasting of the issue at hand. I think that's an important one, because we've in the history of humanity, there's been some major changes, major innovation changes. You can look at automobiles, you can look at electricity, the printing press. They changed the trajectory of the world. And I'm going to argue that AI, and I think a lot of people agree with me, a lot of people wish they didn't agree with me, but probably do anyways, but AI is going to have an effect like that. But the difference this time is the speed. Mm-hmm. This is a compressed cycle, because there is I call it an AI race on between the superpowers to see who can dominate this field first. They've taken off the guardrails and they've just put so much money into this. Nobody's really thinking about what is the return on investment. It's who's going to dominate this new world when it's done. So the guardrails are off. They're spending big time. The AI engine and the machine and the brain has gotten way ahead of where the rest of us are even aware. And when we look at forecasting, there's a common rule that says it's always slower than you think, and it's always bigger than you think, because the human mind fails in understanding the effect of compounding and the exponential effect that you can have and stuff like that. So we're in a phase right now where the technology is way ahead of anything we've thought of doing with it at this point. So we're scrambling, trying to figure out, how do I get what do I do with all this power, this new tool that, I don't know if tool is the right word, this new capability we now have. Nobody's monetized that yet in a significant way. Everybody's tinkering with that, but the power, it's that exponential curve has taken off in the last 6 months, but the application of how to use it, we haven't even started. We're just scratching the surface, dabbling around the corners, but it's going to be massive. They give that old, you fold a piece of paper 42 times, you can reach the moon. I can't validate that. It's possibly true, but when you start to think about it, what does 42 folds of a piece of paper look like? Can't even visualize it. Mm-hmm. We can't understand the impact that this is. It's that far ahead of us right now. And so we're going through a fascinating moment. And my message to leaders is, start thinking now about how this is going to affect your delivery of value, how this is going to affect, you're introducing a new employee to your organization that doesn't get paid, works 24 hours a day, has no moral compass of their own. This is going to affect the workplace. This is going to affect a little bit of everything you do. So, I'm nervous and excited about this change all at the same time. And, but it's going to be big. And I think leaders need to get to that 30,000 foot level and rethink their business plan. Some more so than others. If you're in the hardcore professional service business, this is going to hit you big and fast. If you're selling products that are just straight off the shelf products, yeah, you're going to get some cost efficiencies, but it's not going to be a fundamental. Well, it could be in different areas, but it's going to affect every business in a very different way. And you got to start thinking about it now. And you got to, bring the people in that you need to do it. Get your senior management team together. Maybe bring your customers in, depending on your business, but find out what's about to happen. Try and get ahead of it. It's musical chairs. If you're not thinking your next move and planning your next thing, when the music stops, you're the one standing there with no place to sit. So, it's coming.
Yeah. You mentioned how maybe the average factory won't be impacted in the same way, but we will both be impacted significantly, right? Both of those service businesses and product businesses. Let's get into the AI thing then. So, to be honest, I don't know what our listenership, what our viewership is like, what their paradigms are. I'm assuming, because most of us are entrepreneurs, that we're getting into the AI thing at least a little bit. That we're not completely out of it. And I've seen different industries. I'm in an old industry with real estate where it tends to change very slowly, but I've been seeing a lot of really cool application already. Like you said, the last 6 months, there's been a unique expansion of ability with AI and what it can do, specifically LLMs, but also like video editing, audio editing, that kind of stuff. So maybe give me that 30,000 foot view of how you see AI impacting or disrupting business in general, and then we'll get into it a little bit more.
Yeah, I'll break the market, if you will, because I think there's some industries that are going to be hit a little quicker and a little more significantly, like professional services firms. Let's use that as an example. If there's a lot of research and you're gathering information and you're collating and you're cross-referencing stuff, well, AI is going to rattle that. It already is. The coding and application development business, the consulting business has been rattled in big ways, because that product that you're delivering can now be done by AI. A lot of elements of it can be done by AI a lot faster. You go to a lawyer and you pay them $1,000, 800 of that was for research. And 200 of that was, 100 of that was for their service, and 100 of that is for their liability insurance, just in case they got it wrong. So, but that first 800, now that's not necessary anymore. And that as a consumer. So you're going to start shopping around. So you're going to see margin compression in professional services in a big way. And it's going to force everybody to have to adapt, because if you don't have a solution that can provide your service faster and your competitor does, they're going to stop calling you. As simple as that. So that will be pretty fast and acute. Now you go into other industries where the service isn't the core function of what you sell. It's a part of it. those indirect service costs they're going to be compressed as well. So you're going to see margin over there. So every business is going to have a different level of effect, how fast it's going to hit you, how big it's going to hit you. And some of them it's a full-on business model change. That model that, there once was a business model where guys went around and they scraped the horse dung off the roads before cars came along, and that was an industry. It's no longer an industry. It's gone for obvious reasons. But that's kind of an analogy of how other models are just going to cease to exist because you cannot deliver enough service and make it worthwhile. So you gotta get into your business, look at it from 30,000 and try and look around the corner and see what does the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years look like. Do I need to I got to start training my people on how to be innovative thinkers, always looking for alternative ways of doing things because, this race like I said, it's compressed. We do not have time to wait to see what everybody else is doing. If you're not responding now, you're going to be the one left with the high prices and low margins. And you got to get ahead of that. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but it's so unique to the industry that you're in, the effect of this and the timing of the effect.
Yeah. You said a number of things there. One, you talked about how it erases certain industry. And another example from that era of cleaning up horse dung would be lighting lamps by hand or putting them out every morning, right? Of something that just doesn't exist now. I hear a lot of fear from a lot of people. Like, this is just we're going to have no workforce. And I tend to struggle. I want your opinion on this, Joel, but I tend to struggle with the idea that new technology like this or a leap in technology, a game changer for the world, is going to have everyone jobless. And the reason I kind of go there is I love studying history. There have been some big leaps before, and I would say the Industrial Revolution was a pretty significant leap when it came to what machines can do quicker and better than the average human. And from that, humans actually created millions of new industries. Rather than being jobless, we were able to get creative. And I think maybe you were alluding to this a little bit earlier. But what are your thoughts on that? Of how it affects the workforce, the average person coming to work?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. You can break that into short-term, immediate-term effects and more long-term effects. The short-term there will be an adjustment period. Like there's going to be a change. The structured white-collar jobs. I'm an accountant by trade, so the AI's capability to do what I do, which is research the tax laws, the accounting laws, and come up with some good. It can do it way faster than I can. So it is going to modify that business very significantly, and it's going to change the way work is done, who does it, how many people you need to deliver it, how you price it. And risk is one other. Like, how do you trust it? And so that's going to have a huge effect on that in a big hurry. In the long term, again, we call it artificial intelligence, not artificial wisdom. It's one thing to know that tomato's a fruit. It's another thing to put it in a fruit salad. There's some context that AI may or may not ever get. Whether the long-term effect of it really changes jobs and makes jobs disappear, I don't want to believe it does, but there's a big risk. There's a real chance that it will. And some more physical jobs, they're not likely going away in any big scale, not as a result of AI. They may come as a result of robotics or something like that. But as far as white collar, it is going to change big time. And the other thing that occurred to me was, we'll call them entry level jobs. If you're going into engineering per se, you first job you have is doing all the grunt work. Well, guess what? We've taken the grunt work away. We've given it to AI. So how are you going to train yourself into an industry and gain that wisdom? A lot of other jobs I call them fallback-in jobs. You're planning your career. You never really get it right. Next thing you know, you get yourself a job in an office working some clerical job. That becomes your career. That job doesn't exist anymore. So I can't figure out how people are going to enter the workforce in this new world and build that wisdom that they need. I can't get my head around that step right now, because we're skipping that learning the guts and building it up stage. It's just not going to be there this time. So that'll be huge.
This is an idea that I hadn't thought. And this is a really salient point to this discussion is how there are entry points or middle points that used to be phenomenal for learning that won't exist. And
Yeah.
how do we then train people to do what we need them to do and maybe what only they can do rather than AI when these certain educational stepping stones are missing, and where my mind goes immediately is, so where's the opportunity? How do we, like, you talk about efficiency is going to be using our wisdom rather than just knowledge or intelligence to and our experience to say, hey, listen, if we can make the learning process more efficient, bring people in and get them up and running faster and better, that's now a really unique efficiency. Organizations will take a long time to learn. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Like really education's a missing piece. If you can't learn by practicing, you're the only other way you learn is by being taught. So for those, for jobs that are going to put you in an office environment where you're a judgment person in a chain of events that are sort of managed by AI, you're going to have to be trained into that, not learn it, and you're going to miss the groundwork, and you're just going to have to trust AI. It's like the calculator came in. We don't question how it gets to the math. We just know it does, right? So the math skills of doing math in your head some people still have it naturally, but the average person can't do it very well anymore because we've deferred it to someone else that does it better. And this is going to happen in a bigger scale. So we're going to start learning different things, I guess, I can't really imagine what that's going to be in a business context. I can see in a scientific context how that would be, but in a business context, at the end of the day, you're adding value. You're in a chain of value adding, and you design it once and let the machine run, I guess is the way. And so designing the machine seems to be the core skill set, making sure it runs properly, it runs efficiently. And yeah, I don't know if I answered that question, but it is a tough question to actually think about. I hadn't actually thought about the market, the opportunity that comes from, a new level of entering the workforce, I guess is the best way of putting it.
I've got another question about that, but you just mentioned building the algorithms are going to be kind of key, which I agree with. Again, I told you I'm real estate, so this is like old industry, really basic. I call it business in a box. I'm not a true entrepreneur. I just manage a business in a box, really. But when I purchased this large, like, residential, multifamily plus commercial building, I've got a maintenance guy. Why? Because when we build it, we can't trust that it's always going to run properly, and so we have a maintenance guy to consistently be watching and has a skill set to understand that. I'm seeing that skill set, and again, I'm talking about just bricks and mortar here, but the skill set. I'm usually always looking for somebody who's 60 plus, and I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, like, you guys are the ideal because you've run 8, 9, 10, 12 trades, or you've been on a farm for a long time, or whatever, and you've got this understanding of how things work. And because you've got this basic understanding of how things work, you can figure out these problems as they come up. And I'm willing to pay them more because of their yes, experience, but I guess the way they think, that is incredibly valuable to me. And my guess is that it'll be similar with AI, LLMs, whatever it is, that you've got this maintenance team, and having what is that knowledge base that's going to exist that really puts people forward. Maybe it's going to be all the programmers that we're putting out of business over the years will be those that old guard that goes, hey, at least I know how to troubleshoot. And there might be a time in 50, 60 years where those troubleshooters are by and large just gone. And we just have to trust that 695 times 4,322 equals the number that we punched into the calculator, right? We just have to trust it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's very true. And so the core skill, it sounds like, is you need, we'll call it a translator. I always, as a accountant, I consider myself a translator. I speak the language of business, which is accounting. So, but you need somebody who understands technology and business and can translate it from tech to business and from business to tech. That is going to be a extremely valuable skill. There's people that are trying to become that first, multi-billion-dollar company with only one person. Build an AI machine that's one person and a whole bunch of technology and see who can do it first. I don't think anybody's done it yet, but somebody will. that will, maybe we'll have micro businesses. Maybe we'll have smaller businesses where everything is done in some kind of automated way. And, and we're definitely going to have smaller teams. Whether that means smaller businesses or not, I'm not sure. I assume it will, but yeah, I think that's an interesting skill in teaching that skill, because that analogy you're giving about the maintenance guy, that it is a long line of problem solving that has got him to where he's been. Now he's fully loaded with that skill set. You don't learn that in a book, in a class, in a webinar, in a YouTube video. You learn that by encountering mistakes in the past. I don't know how we mitigate that and go forward in this particular world, but you're going to see people with business skills and technology skills, when you marry them together, they can have a significant leverage effect. And you might see a lot more of those type of business sort of pop up, these pure digital businesses with maybe a couple handful of people and just to give it life. But it's going to be a different skill set to run those businesses for sure.
Yeah, you
so that's getting into sci-fi range out there a little bit, not in the short term, but in the long term, it's going to be like that. Yeah.
I agree with that. And yet this is the disruption that we need to think about and plan ahead for, right? And I think about how many people I've hired in the last year. And when I look at their resume, or I look at what I often give homework to people to see kind of how they handle it when I'm doing the hiring process, depending on the position. But when I do that, I've been handed a resume or an answer, a homework assignment, where I read through it and I go, it's AI generated when it has a box that says, in this blank, fill in for your employer what, you know what I mean? Like it's just complete boilerplate from AI. I'm curious. So obviously it affects the hiring process with resumes, but it also affects our workforce if we give assignments. And again, when I was doing my master's degree, it annoyed me to no end that I saw people not learning, just doing what they needed to get through the class. Because I'm like, what's the point of this? Like, let's learn, let's grow. Like, aren't you excited about this? Why are you even doing this degree? And I saw a lot of people just doing the bare minimum to get by, which is some of the workforce, right? That's all. I mean, hopefully not our workforce that we're training up properly, but a part of the workforce is always going to do that, just the bare minimum, and ask ChatGPT rather than think through the process. How does that affect business in your mind? Again, depends on the industry, but how does that affect business mind? And what do we do to train people to trust themselves with their own expertise rather than trusting a machine or an algorithm?
That's a really good question. I looked through my training and upbringing, and I don't know if I was taught to do a reasonableness check when I'm finished a project of some sort, whether it be creating a report that grabs a bunch of information or doing some research. But when you're done, you step back, you look at it, and just using your judgment from years of experience, you go, does this make sense? Does what their answer they're giving me make sense? And I can do that because I've got lots of iterations and years behind me. But without that iteration of years behind me, I'm incapable of doing that reasonableness check. I can give a recent example. I've got a client who I'm trying to create a new bill of materials for their manufacturing system, and they give him. So I ran this through an AI agent, and it did a fantastic job of creating a multi-level bomb, very complex technical kind of thing, and it created this fancy list for me. I said, "This is awesome." And then I looked at it and go, "I can't. My gut isn't trained to tell me whether this is reasonable. I got to go find someone else to do that for me." And so how do you make sure that people are doing that gut check, that reasonableness check, to see if something just didn't go off the rails? In the AI world, you ask a question the wrong way, and it could go grab a completely different set of data that you weren't expecting. So that is going to be a real challenge for leadership going forward, is garbage information going out, because the person creating it doesn't have the experience to validate it. And we're going to have to, that'll be a manual process of, maybe it's a cross check. Maybe it's, okay, you go give this to the old curmudgeon in the back room and let him analyze this and tell you whether or not something got missed. I'm not sure how to do that, but that will be a real risk in the short term and the medium term anyways. I suspect over time, these AI machines are going to be more coded better and tested, and so that you're not going to have to rely on yourself. But if you're just doing it prompt based, if you ask the wrong question, you get the wrong answer, and you better be able to tell. And so in the short term, this is going to be a real big issue, I would imagine. Yeah, I think it is.
Well, it's fascinating that you're talking about this because it almost sounds like we're coming to the realization, even in just talking for the last 10, 15 minutes, whatever it's been, 20 minutes, oh, it's close to half an hour. Sorry, time's going fast. That experience is taking on a different value than it has in the past. Like in the past, I've seen a lot of organizations move to youth because it's easy to train somebody up and they're being paid less. Whereas now I go, they're almost, as we're talking, tell me if I'm wrong with this, but it sounds like experience is going to have a different value, especially certain types of experience. When somebody can do, like you said, do that gut check or just do the, I can't remember what type of check you said, but just see whether, does this make sense? So there's a thing, I'm sure you've heard of this, of AI hallucinations. And what a hallucination is again, LLMs, if for those out there who don't know how LLMs work or ChatGPT or any of this stuff works, what an LLM does is it is always guessing. It's basically just looking at patterns and taking a guess at what is the most probable answer here. So for example, the example I always give people is if I say old, what is the next word in the sentence? People give me 1,000 words to that. But if I tell anybody in North America, Old MacDonald, what's the next word in the sentence? Everyone says had, right? Because we're already singing the song in our heads. And that's what LLMs do. So when LLMs go down this pattern, just like with the wrong premise, if we have the wrong premise, it takes us down the wrong direction. If an LLM, whatever it is, starts going down the wrong route or pathway too far, it will start making things up. It completely doesn't make sense. It has no bearing on reality, but these are what happens all the time. And if we don't have the reference check, like you talked about, if we don't have enough experience to go, does this make sense from what I know? Or we don't have the right person in the room, we can get into big trouble very, very quickly. What are your thoughts on all of that? I just spoke for a while there.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's an interesting insight. So that's where that experience is going to need to stick around for a while this plays itself out. There's no question about that. And yeah, that there's probably a bit of a market for that.
That's super valuable. Let's go back maybe to some of your experience. So when you are helping leaders with tech, or specifically with AI, what are the specific things, or maybe what are the specific problems that you're seeing or the hurdles that you're seeing, and how are you helping people out with those?
Yeah, well, we're still, strangely enough, we're still at the last generation of problems. We never even bothered to solve the last generation of problems, which is really data clarity, data clean, data integration. Every time I enter new organizations, the one thing that seems to pop up a lot, which is not a new problem, is the islands of data. Now, AI can clean that up by going and grabbing stuff at different locations, but I've gone into a lot of organizations and they have some version of, we used to call it an S drive, which is that shared directory where everybody stores things. Well, I've never seen an organization where that wasn't an absolute mess, right?
Yeah.
So it's got good data in there, but it's got 6 versions of a file, and maybe AI finds version 2 and starts going down that rabbit hole, not realizing that this is not your good data. So it will take you down the bad rabbit hole. And that's where the hallucination comes from, because there's a lot of bad data out there too. And it can't tell. It can't necessarily say this file is right and that one isn't. So the same thing happens on the internet. So yeah, that is a significant challenge as well. And I don't know, when I talk to these people, it's you've got to have quality data. That means, I call it data discipline, and organizations make sure that when you're collecting information, which we do all day, every day in a million different ways, that you're structured about how you do that. Because AI will be able to understand it better. People definitely understand it better than unstructured data, and we still have that problem. So, I like to talk to the people about, you've got to think broadly about your total data collection system, your information reporting system, and where it all lives, where it all belongs, and look at the entire cycle of it. Don't just cherry pick certain solutions to certain distinct problems. You're just batting around the bottleneck or the friction points. Just move around when you do that. So look at the whole system, and don't chase shiny objects and buy new software solutions. Solve the problem, like the system, not the individual problem. So I always go back to that. Integrate your data. Figure out how it gets shared amongst the different areas, who's using it for what, who's saving it, who's capturing it, who's using it, how does it convert from just data into information. That's the key part. It's always been a problem. Everybody has got data. We got servers and servers of data, but we lack information. And that's a thought process. That is build it. And that hasn't changed. We've just got a brand new tool that can shortcut some of the problems that we've not learned how to deal with, which is the massive data that we have on our networks everywhere. We now have a new employee that can come along, can actually make some sense of that, but again, can also hallucinate too if you don't get this right. So yeah, it's going to be a fantastic, a transition period. I used to say that Excel is putting more construction companies out of business than anything else. You get it wrong and its magnitude's wrong. We're going to see a few of these AI issues too, where somebody took a risk on an AI decision, comment, direction, choice, and it destroyed their business. So we will see a little bit of that. Don't be one of those ones. Don't bet big, because there's just too many things wrong with this yet. Small pilot projects, test it. You need an innovation mindset in your people. They all have to be looking for, okay, this is taking way too much time. And they can't be afraid of losing their jobs and then hoarding the things that they do. You've got to get people comfortable, get them to release this stuff, and get them engaged in an innovation mindset. Find a better way. Someone's coming for our margin. Let's start working on this now. Let's innovate. Let's find a clever solution to this issue, this pain point and whatnot. So, again, it's not a new problem in technology. It's a new tool that's added some new problems to it, but that core issue is still the center of what I would tell any, and it's people, process, and technology. All three of those have to be factored into what you're thinking about, and get your people used to that. Get them thinking that way for you, because that's going to make all the difference.
You've talked about people, process, tech several times now, and talked about these three pillars. Maybe step back a little bit, because we're starting to get a little bit low on time. I want to respect your time, but you've mentioned a few times, I want to make sure that we do it justice, so that people aren't reading into it what we want to. Explain what you mean by these three pillars in particular, and the role that they play for you, or the importance for you.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the delivering value for your customer, it requires, the time and effort and judgment of people. It includes an information system that manages the steps. It includes how do you marry the people with the technology, and that's process. So if any one of those three pillars is weak or non-existent or at a different level than the other two, it'll always be unbalanced. And you might have too many people and not enough tech, and therefore you can't process fast enough. You can't race fast enough. You might have all the tech, but nobody who understands how it works, and you're going to get bad information. So they all have to be viewed in the terms of a cycle. You have to think about all three in terms of that cycle. Otherwise, you'll get an unbalanced, and you'll spin down one of those paths. I read a saying the other day, which was pretty clever. Was leadership without process is chaos, and process without leadership is bureaucracy. So I always keep that spectrum in my mind, that that all has to be thought of together. You can't isolate it and just go hardcore and process, or you become bureaucratic and ground down. And you can't just muscle through with leadership, or you cannot scale that kind of structure. So you've got to figure out how to marry these three things together, and they marry at the process point. You got tech and you got people. They marry when you get to process, and if you don't think that through properly, you're going to end up on the bureaucratic side or the chaos side, and neither side is very good for a business. So process is where you balance that.
Okay, I appreciate that because that's clear enough that I think it'll make sense to everybody. I was just taking a couple of notes because I remembered a couple of things that I wanted to ask or wanted to say, and maybe what I'll do is I'll leave this for the outro when I put this together in a few minutes, Joel. What I'd like to do to finish off here, and again, respect your time. I really appreciate this. This has been a fun enough discussion that I legitimately time traveled a little bit over the last 45 minutes. Went, where did the time go? I thought there was 10 minutes, not 40. Um, tell me a little bit more again specifically about Redline and what you're doing, as well as if anyone needs to reach out to you for help, or if you're looking to expand in different ways, let people know how to get in touch with you.
Yeah, we're a professional services firm. We focus on integrating these three pillars and focus primarily on construction, but the rules apply to, well, any business. Some more relevant than others, any professional service firm or whatnot. But that's what we like to do, and we meet the client where they are. This is the situation they're in, this is the tools that they've got, this is the people that they got. Okay, let's move forward from here. We don't come in with a solution in our backpack going, okay, you got to buy the software. We meet them where they're at, try and understand, because this is a strategy thing, this is a business model thing, this is a scaling thing, a leadership thing. We meet them where they are, learn where they're at, and then search for we'll call it the 5 biggest opportunities, the 5 bottlenecks or friction points that are harming and interfering with the business the most. And then try and work through 1, 2, 3, or all 5 of those things with some combination of the technology, the people, or the process. It usually includes all 3 to a certain extent. And start working with them on that. And it's amazing that if you prioritize these 5, you'll find that priority number 1 and priority number 2 are big impact items. And once you can release those, we call it the 2 times effect. With the same people you have, you can do twice, 3 times, 4 times the amount of work if you just remove a few bottlenecks and streamline and marry them together with process. You can grow exponentially, or you don't necessarily grow, you allow the growth to happen without bureaucracy or chaos blocking it. So that's how we look at it. And so if anybody's trying to envision what the next phase of their life is going to be like and wants to step back and take a real honest view at what are their opportunities they have in their business, that's where we like to come in. And there are others out there that do that, but it's good to have a third party, because sometimes you're so deep in the business you can't see the business. So it's good to have a fresh set of eyes and a different perspective, and that's what we like to bring. And we think that this cycle is accelerating so fast now with AI that you gotta start working on it. It's going to change sometime soon. And you're going to want to be ready as you can be. You can't be perfectly ready, but you can be one step ahead of where you are now, at least. So that's the way we look at it.
Well, I know that you help organizations with more than just chaos and bureaucracy, but legitimately, if people feel like we're getting bogged down here or things are chaotic, those would be great reasons to reach out to you. Is there a best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, our website has a contact point, or LinkedIn is another one that is easy to find me on. I try and be loud out there. Yeah, I've been doing some speaking engagements too, trying to meet some new people and tell my story. But again, this is big, it's fast, and it's unique. And I'm kind of excited that part of me wishes I'm at the end of my career. I wish this chaos didn't happen now. But the other one is like, what? This re-energizes the next decade of my career with a new opportunity and some brand new problems that sort of fit into the world, my worldview of this technology and people problem that we're having. So please reach out to me. I love talking about this stuff and find some insights.
Yeah, and I mean, where I'll finish off is that we talked a lot about experience. You talked about chaos arriving now. Well, what better people to handle it than people with some experience, right? That have that base, so they can view things in a different way than maybe. So I'll give you an example. So my kids, they're teenagers right now. I don't know whether Y, Z, they're whatever generation they are. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going, it's fascinating to watch them. They can't spell anything. Now, both my kids read voraciously. They love reading. They've read really unique books, maybe that most kids don't, whether it's a Ulysses, or whether it's I don't know, Tale of Two Cities, just something that's older. So they've got a great vocabulary, but they cannot spell because they don't write. Spell check
Yeah.
has changed their experience or their ability to do that check on, does this make sense? Whereas for me, I've written a ton, I've read a ton, but I mean, you saw me. I was writing a whole bunch of notes as you were talking because I'm using that different form of taking down information. I can process things in a different way. And again, I'm fascinated with this idea, Joel. I'm going to go down a few rabbit holes just after this episode, after this interview. So I appreciate you making my brain explode a little bit today. I'm sure that you'll help a lot of other people's brains explode a little bit in a wonderful way that we can start exploring. Hey, how does this look for me in my organization? How can I help my organization prepare for it so that we do it properly? I'll finish things off here. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for giving it to us, and maybe just stick around after this. I've got a couple other quick questions for you. Okay.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks a lot. It was a lot of fun.
Wasn't that a good interview? I talked about heads exploding at the end there, but legitimately, my mind is racing. My mind's going to a whole bunch of different places about how is this going to affect my team specifically, but how is this going to affect the industry? One thing that I consistently think about especially with new technology, is I think about gold rushes. Gold rushes were a big deal for the people involved. Everyone got really excited about them. And the people who did the best were usually the service industries that supported the gold rush rather than the average miner who was doing it, right? This is not the gold rush. When I think about AI, I think about the internet. I think about the Industrial Revolution. I think about things that had an impact on everybody on different levels, not just a few people who went up to the Yukon or down to San Francisco or wherever they went, right? Legitimately, this is going to have an impact. As Joel said, this is sci-fi. We don't know all of the impact that AI will have, but I'm going to just go through my notes as I talk here. I ramble on a bit. Again, major point was tech, people, and process, and how tech and people need to communicate properly with that process. Just as a review of some things that really stood out to me, one was how service-based businesses are going to be probably first greatly affected, whereas product-based businesses may take a little while, depending on the product, right? Depending on whether it's made in a factory or whether it's created online for people. One thing that I asked was, again, what about hiring? What about an LLM? How do you read through when somebody hands you something, whether it's a new hire or a potential new hire, or whether it's somebody who you already have working for your organization? When they hand you some document, how do you know whether it's done by Chat GPT or not? And I mean, Chat GPT is not the only one, right? I'll throw a few out there. So the main, I would say maybe main three LLMs or large language models are ChatGPT, Claude, or the third one is Gemini, made by Google. And legitimately, I'm going to ask the question, does it matter? Does it matter in the end whether your employee or your potential new hire hands you something that's done by an LLM or a ChatGPT rather than coming up with it on their own? I don't know the answer to that right now. Where my mind goes after that conversation is, you know what? It probably matters from the standpoint of asking myself, how much effort, how much time and energy does my employee actually need to put into this? Because if somebody is innovative and they're thinking outside of the box and creating something better than what they could themselves, great, that's fantastic for me and my organization and everyone involved in the organization. Having said that, if it's something where people are now, instead of working 8 hours, working and getting all their stuff done in 2, but I'm still paying them for 8, now we need to ask some better questions. Like, how do I make better use of this individual who's a genius in some area at figuring this stuff out? How do I make use of their skill set in other areas for the entire time, rather than just paying them to work for a couple hours a day? Research and knowledge-based industries. So one industry I actually think a lot about, Joel mentioned lawyers. One industry I think about are doctors, specifically GPs. A general practitioner in North America is the top of a funnel, right? And that top of the funnel, they're the person who just kind of takes a ton of information and analyzes that information. And based on their experience and their education, their research, they go, okay, I'm going to point you now into that funnel, the right direction, so you talk to the right specialist. That's what a GP is. Well, if ChatGPT has access to more knowledge, more data. Sorry, I'll use data instead of knowledge. When ChatGPT can make use of more data and look at different case studies and say, hey, this matches closest to A rather than B, C, D, E, F. We know GPs make a lot of mistakes. In my mind, I go, are GPs going out of business? Or the majority of GPs? But then I go back to this conversation that Joel and I just had of asking, well, hold on a sec. Who does the checks on whether the answer passes muster or not? Because that's a very good question. We need these people with experience of some kind as a checkpoint, as an ability to say, is this making sense? Will experience be what we all want to hire in the future? Will experience be the thing that we all want to hire in the future, even as a check, as that maintenance person that is going to come in and say, hey, listen, there's something off here. Something's not running properly based on what I know about programming, or based on what I know about people, or based on what I know about a building, whatever that is, right? Based on their experience. One thing that Joel mentioned that we didn't really get into, he talked about how wisdom is different than intelligence. And I think the example he used was the tomato. He said, like, yeah, everyone can say, here, put this tomato in the recipe. But here's where people are different than AI. Where people are different than AI is a person can go to the store and look at a kilo of tomatoes and ask themselves, how many of these are damaged? Are these overripe? Are these underripe? How many people can, or how many AI systems can then go to the dish and add the ingredients right in the proper order, but then taste it and say, not is this a good dish, but is this a good dish for my family or for my specific tastes? Because I love cooking, but I followed recipes from Michelin 3-star chefs. Sometimes that I go, I don't like this. I followed the recipe. I've done it the way they would do it. I'm going to change it up. Because there is this uniqueness to humanity in that we want to experience what we want to experience, not what is best for everyone or everyone else, right? So I just thought about that a little bit. Again, Joel talked about data hygiene and how it's really important to manage data properly, and how that's where hallucinations can take place with AI. Maybe the last point that I'll touch on. So after the interview, Joel and I hung out for a few more minutes, just talking about, if we do another one of these podcasts, what could we talk about? Because I could go on and ask way more questions that we didn't even come close to covering in this one. So in a couple of months, I probably will reach out to Joel again and nudge him to say, hey, do you mind coming on? Give me another 45 minutes of your time, an hour of your time. One thing we didn't talk about is what kind of companies will do really well. And I think Joel hinted at this. He talked about kind of small companies doing really well. Where my mind went to with that was nimble companies. Because if a company is too bureaucratic, if there's just too much that needs to change, I think about banks. Banks are these huge or governments, huge bureaucratic organizations where it's just so slow to change. One, because they don't need to, generally speaking. And two, because they're bogged down with too much process, too much data, too much stuff that is actually incredibly inefficient. I don't love banks. I don't love dealing with banks because of the inefficiencies, because I want to have things run in a nimble way. And my guess, and one of the big takeaways that I'm getting from this interview is, how do I create a nimble organization, an organization that will change with the times? And even though I've got like an employee that I love, that I really care about, that's been in the organization for a really long time, there are times to say goodbye to people. There are also times to say, hey, where can we maybe change you into a new position? Now, this depends on the size of the organization. I don't have a very large organization. I've got 4 employees. Because I've only got 4, there are very limited seats. I can't just say, hey, listen, I love you, so we're going to put you on the roof rather than in the boiler room, just because I want to keep you hired. My business wouldn't survive if I did that. But how do we manage this? And I believe the answer is being nimble. How nimble can we be? Which, if we're honest, is the answer that's been true all along. How nimble were we a decade ago, or 20 years ago, or 40 years ago? If we are a little more nimble, if we adapt a little more quickly, if we understand enough to make ourselves dangerous in our own organization so that we can change with the times, I believe that that's one of the key components that came out of this conversation. Again, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Please, as usual, send in questions, send in comments. If there's something that I didn't cover that you're like, Mark, are you kidding me? How could you not have asked this question? Please do that, because I'd love to give you more information. I'd love to make this podcast series as valuable as possible to each one of you. You enjoy your day, your week, your month, wherever this finds you. We'll talk to you soon.